from calling a new business with a random inquiry to say, hey, it's kind of random. Can we come film this thing and try to pitch that? Like, that was so natural to us. So, and we've met a lot of YouTubers over the years that struggle with a lot of those components, but they really like their one thing. For us, there's not really one thing that we enjoy. We enjoy the whole process.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Abundant Journey podcast. Thank you for hanging out with us today. I'm your host, Nick James, as always. We've got a special show lined up with a great friend of mine, Kylan Johnson. And we go back to the Bowflex days that I have told you all many times about, where I was doing Bowflex sales, and it really hit me early on that Kylan was a guy who looks at the world differently. He's one of those people who said, hey, I'm going to live life on my own terms, and I am going to be an entrepreneur. So this has been a podcast episode that I have been excited to get lined up for quite a long time. And man, we're going to dive right in because we got numerous topics to cover today. So Kylan, what is up, sir? How are you, man?
Hey, awesome, man. I'm so excited to have this conversation. I think, this is super cool what you guys are working on. And I'm excited. I think there's a lot of conversation to explore. And like you said, I think, our history of going back is something worth exploring. And, there's nothing that beats the good old Bowflex days. So, even you saying that is just like, man, there's so much from that time that was precious to me and was monumental. So I'm definitely excited to explore that.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we're going to do is we're going to go back even further than your Bowflex days, because that's when our relationship and friendship started. But I don't know much about the entrepreneur Kylan before that. But before we get into that, you guys are traveling on the road. Tell our guests who you are, what you're doing right now, and where you are, because usually when we talk on the phone, I never know where you are in the country.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's a good place to start, because a lot of times I don't know where I'm at. So right now, as we talk, we are in Phoenix, Arizona. So my wife and I, we run a YouTube channel for kids. We do episodes for kids where we go on field trips and kind of document. In a way, it's a mini documentary about learning different experiences, meeting different people, kind of showing kids and toddlers, specifically our age range is typically 0 to 6 years old. And our goal is to just kind of showcase fun experiences for kids that maybe they wouldn't get to kind of enjoy otherwise. So we're actually on a nationwide tour. This is something that's new for us. We're going all around the country, hosting actually story time events and bike clinics. We do BMX bike clinics, and we're traveling around with our family. We have 4 kids, and we are in an RV and a big old trailer with all of our stuff. And we're going week to week, different city each week of the year, actually. So 2024 is going to be pretty crazy. So right now it's the beginning of the year, and we're in Phoenix, Arizona, getting things started in the sun. So it's definitely fun, a little bit chaotic, but that's the way we like it. So
I love it. And this whole RV life is not new to you guys, even specific to, your tour right now as you're ramping up. I mean, this is something y'all have embraced. How long have you been doing that?
Yeah. So it's a little bit complicated. I think this is probably the story of my life as a whole. It's been on and off. So we left the Portland area back in 2019. Kind of just on a wild hair. We're like, hey, let's try this thing like full time. So this is before the pandemic. We sold everything. Didn't even have anything in storage. So we just absolutely sold everything and put that towards traveling. I had just left a partnership there in Portland, and it was something that was just kind of the right timing. There was not a lot, we didn't have a lot of responsibility at the time, not a lot of money either, but it definitely was something that we were like, hey, let's just try this thing. Our kids are young. There's a lot of, I think, in our conversation today, you'll see there's a lot of, red flags that we ignored to go ahead and make that happen. And it was something that we definitely don't regret at all. So that was in 2019. We traveled for a year. We got really sick. Some would say it was the COVID before COVID existed, that got us off the road. And then COVID hit, when we actually had gotten back on the road. We were in Texas, COVID hit. And then there were RV parks weren't accepting new reservations. We couldn't go to public land. So we had to make a decision of finding somewhere to land. We didn't have a house. We didn't have a home base anymore. We had definitely said goodbye to the Portland area of Vancouver. And so we hightailed it back to Port Angeles, Washington, up in the Olympic Peninsula, kind of just to hide out. We wanted to be close to nature, be able to get outside and, have a little bit more control over what we do with our kids during the, unforeseeable future during that. So we ended up getting a long-term rental there. We hung out there for 3 years, traveled a bunch while we were there, but had a home base. And then in planning and preparation for this tour, we sold everything again, put it all in storage, did kind of the same thing, and maybe a little bit more planning this time. And then we hit the road in October 1st. So we've been on the road for 3 months now, and it's been awesome. So again, it's just, every day has its challenge, but it's definitely something that we really enjoy, kind of scaling down our life. And living in an RV, you really have to be intentional with what you bring into both like your physical presence, but also, emotionally and mentally. You have to really look at everything that comes onto the table and make sure that that's something that you're, only giving space to things that, need to be there. So,
yep.
That's awesome. We, my wife and I did a similar kind of thing where we sold everything that we owned in Minneapolis as we were moving back here, and we lived in a fifth wheel for about 9 months. And I hear you, like it really forces you to be intentional about, not just the material possessions, but that 400 square feet only has so much space for attitudes and emotions and all of that, which is it's good. How big is your team that's working on the story times and everything that you're doing with your YouTube channel, Brecky Breck?
Yeah, so it's kind of a unique story, and I can go back maybe a little bit to kind of preface this part of kind of what we're working on. Right now, we have a contract editor that does some work sometimes. Outside of that, it's my wife and I, and then our kids are actually like boots on the ground for our events. So we're running everything. A big part of that is maybe less. We definitely are working towards building a team. The nature of YouTube Kids is a little bit challenging because it's not as it's not as financially profitable or beneficial as a non-kids channel, for probably good reasons. And that's just the ad rates. They can't collect data on minors. And so we definitely believe in that and appreciate it, but it definitely makes it challenging to navigate growing a team and the expense side of things. So basically, we were joking around, my wife and I, the other day. We were kind of like arguing over titles like talent management, creative director, admin, like these kind of things. Like, no, you're the, and like sometimes like I'm the talent management and my wife's the talent, so I'm having to manage her or whatever. So, so I edit last night. Actually, I was up till 4 a.m. editing a video that posted this morning. So, and that's just the nature of kind of YouTube. There's definitely a piece of that where it's like, there's kind of an allure to that grind a little bit that is kind of fun, but I'm definitely at a point where we're ready to start kind of growing our team, and that's something that we're looking for admin support and bring on more kind of intentional editing and kind of post-production team as well. So
very cool.
I love that, and a lot of times people just get this mindset. They see little clips on Instagram or YouTube and they think, hey, this is easy to do, but you're speaking to the reality. And I'm sure we'll dive more into that as we get going in the conversation of just the grind and the willingness to do what you do. But if it's the passion and the heart behind it, then that is worth it all the while. So let's go back here again. I told our audience we're going to go back to early days because you are one of those entrepreneurial people, and that's you bleed it, you live it. Hence 4 a.m. editing videos. But let's go back before then. I'm curious, if that was something that was always in your DNA, or if there was some mentors or influencers that made you say, hey, this is the path that I'm going to take. So take us back as far as you want to go, but pre-Bowflex days.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, no, I love telling my story. And I think that's less of trying to get people to hear my story and more of I think there's a beautiful part of even personally having to go back and like, hey, what did influence me to be where I'm at today? So there's an awareness piece that I think is I appreciate. So thank you for asking that. For me, I definitely start. I can pin back to even my childhood. My dad was a big influence to kind of how I view the world and work and creativity. He always exampled that. My dad ran a Christian summer camp in the Columbia Gorge in the Portland area. He was the executive director and then ran kind of all the national camps for the organization as well. And with that, he wore a bunch of hats, and he kind of exampled that to me growing up. I was able to kind of see and be a part of kind of all these different pieces. He took me to meetings. I remember being in meetings for him meeting with the website designer. And this is like back in, I think, the late 90s. So website design was like, like this foreign concept. And my dad was definitely like always kind of, ahead of the curve with that stuff. He's a lot more, maybe more admin and, management focused, but definitely has that entrepreneurial spirit. And so that's something that I grew up just watching. And then actually when I was 14 years old, this is, kind of a big, monumental point of my life and shift in kind of this thinking. My dad actually convinced me to take all of my birthday money and buy a camera. So I bought a digital camera. It was a Sony CyberShot. I wish I still had it. We had it up until a couple of years ago when we actually moved, hit the road full time. We just like got rid of everything. And that's one thing I was like, man, I wish I would have kept that thing. He convinced me to buy a camera and he said, hey, let's start a photography business and I'll help you get some clients. Which was kind of cool because up until that point, I think my perspective, my dad, his creativity was just kind of a part of his job. So there definitely wasn't the entrepreneur piece. I didn't understand that or see that. But this was kind of the real first introduction to like what an entrepreneur is, or like starting your own business. Because my dad actually didn't run his own business. He was, he worked for this organization, and he was a pastor before that. So I think this, in a way, was him even maybe experimenting too. In hindsight, I think he was like, I'm kind of curious about this too. So, so we bought the camera. We started building a website, and then I was 14 at the time. It's like, I think coming out of middle school, this was a weird season for me. So I think I didn't bite on the photography piece, but there's something about the logo design and the website design process that was like, it was like a light bulb that went off. So he taught me Photoshop and Adobe during that time, and he had the program, and back then you had to like order it all and download it with like, I think it was still a CD or something, which is weird now. But so anyway, my dad introduced me to that whole process. So I think that was the introduction to like digital entrepreneurship and kind of freedom over creativity. So that was a big kind of movement for me into high school. And I'd always kind of been a little bit different. I think I struggled socially. I was always outgoing, and then especially being a part of, we basically lived all summer at this summer camp that my dad ran. And so we helped facilitate the events. So I kind of naturally was able to kind of communicate well and work with adults, work with all different types of ages because I was running events for them. But I always struggled peer to peer. That was something that was always difficult for me. And to this day, honestly, like I'm not someone that, in a party setting or group setting, I can, turn it on and be full of life. But I'm really, I'm realizing more and more as I get older, I'm definitely a one-to-one type of personality that enjoys, intentional relationships. So, if there's not intention to the relationship, that's something that has always been challenging. So I say all that because going into high school, I didn't necessarily fit into cliques. I had my groups. I played all the sports. I played football, basketball, baseball. I ran track. So I had my friends, technically speaking, but I just never was interested in like parties or like doing things outside of school for some reason. And what that led me to really was kind of exploring kind of self-development, which I feel like is something that I recognize is not typical for people going into early high school and looking at self-development. How can I get better? And one thing is like, I always, like, for some reason, I was always like, I can't wait to be older get married and have kids. Like that was just always something that was like, I just can't wait for that. Like there's something about that just sounds joyful to me. I remember always thinking that I would go with my mom to her Bible study and I would babysit like all the kids. So all the kids would come in and I just have like, there's just like this joyfulness that I just experience around them. So there's this definitely piece of me that like, I felt like, I kind of had this, this purpose and I was kind of expecting what that could be. And so anyway, through high school, I ended up taking a computer class pretty early on. I think it was either freshman or sophomore year. And because I was not into the social side, I really latched onto this computer professor, and we had MacBooks that were part of the program. I was already into kind of design and website stuff. So I kind of maybe was ahead of the class, if that makes sense. And so the computer teacher actually let me keep a MacBook all like summer long. So it was kind of not, I don't even think he like wrote it down or anything. It was like, yeah, you take one, like you're good. So, and this was like before a time that I think a lot of people just had laptops. So it was like the school program had it, but not a lot of people just had laptops around. So this was maybe like 2005, 2006. And so, so I had a laptop. And so now it's like, now I'm like practicing video editing. I'm doing skits. I'm messing around on Adobe. I'm doing website design. This was like back on like GoDaddy's first version of their website editor. I'm messing around with website code. I'm like kind of self-learning. And so what this did was it gave me a tool, and this professor kind of enabled me to like go explore and gave me the freedom to go explore. And I think that was definitely a key point in my life that was like, I give you permission to explore in a way. So our program got new laptops like every year, and he would give me a new laptop every year. So like wow. All throughout high school, I had a laptop that I just got to use as my own. And again, like this was something like no one had laptops at this point, unless like you were going to college, but this was before college for me. So I think that was just that maybe just kind of put a flame to kind of what I had already been kind of interested in. So I took video production classes. I took website design classes. Very entry level. It was nothing crazy, but it was just, again, it was that permission to explore these things. And then I've seen, there's definitely been some like reels and memes that I've seen about this before, but I made for every class outside of that computer kind of program, I would always make a video for my final projects. And the memes and the reels I always see is like when you make a video for a final project and the teacher's just so blown away by the video that the quality of what you actually learned, they're not judging that. They're just like, wow, technology, woo! So I definitely like cashed in on that. Like, all right, this is going to be, I'm going to turn on the projector and everyone else is just reading their paper. That's boring. So, the delivery for what I was actually doing a project on was probably less than. So I'm definitely not like an overachiever by any means. I'm going to deliver exactly what's needed to get by. So I can test well. So I'll show up and test well, and then I'll do what I'll figure out what this teacher is, what kind of language I need to speak to them, and I'll deliver just enough to give to them, and then I'm going to go back to exploring and doing my thing. So that was high school for me. A lot of video projects that I wish I could find. There's like many times I'm like running into like, oh, where was that thing? What was that one project? Or I'll bump into someone that was in one of those classes with me. Like, oh, no way. I totally forgot that we made this like silly video of, or whatever. So there's a lot of skit stuff that, to be honest with you, I wish I also would have just thrown up on YouTube because, that was a pretty early days for YouTube and I was already doing all that work. So it definitely took a long time to get to the YouTube side of things and actually start uploading. But so that's definitely the early part of it. Right after high school, actually in high school, I met my wife and we started dating. My dad actually hired her mom to come run that same summer camp. So we met at that camp. I had never dated before. I wasn't really even interested. I never kind of messed around with girls. That was a big flirt, but that was kind of the extent of it. Girls actually got kind of annoyed and started asking me out. So it was like, what's this guy doing? Come on. Like, then I was like, nah, I'm good. I was like, I just want to work. I want to put I was a little bit of a recluse like that. So, but anyway, I met my now wife and her we describe it now like it was an interesting kind of season because we're high schoolers and like it'd probably be really cringy if we could go back from a third person and like watch what actually happened. But from our perspective, it was it definitely was. It felt like I was kind of not like looking down at all of what normal people do or what normal high schoolers were looking at. I was kind of like looking to like I want to be intentional in my life. I want to build something. I want to do something. I don't know what that is, but I felt like I was looking up. And we always describe it as like I felt like my now wife was doing the same, and we caught eyes. And it was like we were both kind of looking up to something bigger, something more intentional. Not that we knew what that was, but we kind of like recognized like, oh, you're kind of doing that too. And there was something special about that took me from I'm not interested in dating. I don't care about, like building a relationship with women or girls right now to like that person I need to spend some time with. So like almost like immediately. And again, this is the part where it's like, I can maybe like fantasize what they actually look like. But, in reality, we were just like teenagers that in high school, like, ooh, you want to, go out with me or whatever. So anyway, we've been married for 13 years now. And we got married. She went to college. Gosh, there's so much in the story, so I don't want to like drag it on. But she went to college. She got a scholarship to Oral Roberts University. So she was like, "Hey, I'm going to do this." She's definitely like driven. She's always kind of been a self motivator. If she puts her mind to something, she's like, "You better get out of my way, or you're going to get hurt," kind of thing. So, which has definitely been like we're definitely like. We're both motivated people, but we just find that motivation differently. So I didn't know what I wanted to do after high school. I had applied to colleges, but like I said before, I kind of didn't give my best effort in high school. So it was a little bit challenging getting into some of the colleges that I was interested in. I was interested in architecture initially. So I was applying to architecture programs. And then I actually applied to the New York Film Academy and LA Film School and got accepted to both of those. Ended up not doing any of that, and then I followed Breck, my wife, to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and so I basically was just kind of following what she was moving towards. We weren't married yet at the time, and I didn't have a job. I had no idea what I wanted to do. Both of our families were a little bit like, you guys need to figure yourselves out. Like, you're rushing stuff, typical young, relationship. So I ended up moving to Tulsa. Well, actually, sorry, let me clarify. I had a one-way ticket to Tulsa, and had no idea what I was going to do, against pretty much everybody's will, and flew out to Tulsa. To be where my wife was going to school. Sorry, go ahead.
Were y'all married yet or no?
So we weren't married yet. Okay. But I gave her a promise ring. So it's like, it's in the works. Right. And so again, we're like, I don't know, we're like, whatever, 18 years old. So like, that's the part of it where it's like, I can like glamorize the story, but in reality, I know my kids are going to get to that age. And from my perspective, it's going to be, you're just kids. What are you doing? But like, it's like, I just got to trust it, like whatever. So we weren't married. I flew out there. I think I reached out to like a pastor or something about like helping get like housing or connections to something. So I move out, or I fly out there with no plans. Like, I didn't know when I was going to fly back. I was just kind of like, I'm going to see what happens. And then my girlfriend at the time with a promise ring, whatever that means, was like, sure, come on, like, figure it out. I'm going to school though. So like, you have to come to me. That's basically what it was. So I flew out there, and then stayed at this pastor's house for 2 weeks, got a job at Kohl's department store, making $7.10 an hour.
Plus Kohl's cash, right?
Plus Kohl's cash. Oh yeah. Yeah. I got to get those good deals. That's exactly right. And then basically worked for 2 weeks, got an extended stay hotel for another week or two. And then in between that time, there was a couple times where I didn't have enough money for the hotel. So I slept in, my wife's car. We weren't married at the time. So, she had dorms, but it's a Christian college. And so there's like they're definitely separate dorms. I was never even allowed in their dormitory or anything. So I would take her car to like a Home Depot, or there was like a Subway down the street, and I would line it with cardboard, and I'd sleep out of the car. And so I would just like, and that was, I maybe did that for a week total. Got an extended stay hotel, and then finally had my first paycheck from Kohl's that I went directly over to the closest apartment and got an apartment right down the street from the college. And I think back then, this wasn't that long ago. It was whatever, 2011, I think, 2010, 2011. It would have been 2010. I think my apartment rent was, I don't know, like $350 a month. So it was, I wasn't making much, but it also didn't cost much to live in that area, in Tulsa at the time. So I think that was just another, I didn't know. I just kind of wandered into this like very stressful situation, but because I didn't have this expectation of comfort or this expectation of this is how it's supposed to go, I think that ended up showing me that it's okay to sleep out of a car, right? There's no one that told me that. My parents were definitely, honestly, to this day, I don't even know if they know that that's what happened. And so I think for me, it was more of just the willingness to explore and just see what happens definitely led to that experience turning out okay. It definitely wasn't in the moment. I got severe bronchitis when I first moved. I was stressed out. I didn't know what I was doing. So I was like, every part of that, again, I can glamorize the story, but every part of it was very much like, what am I doing? Like, I don't even know. Our parents don't even technically want us to get married. Like, I'm over here, like, I'm committing my life to you. I'm going to do this thing. And so I didn't ask her to marry me yet because I was honoring some of our family members. There was, we were working on that, and there was some hesitancy with kind of let's say blessing our relationship moving forward. So that was challenging. We were navigating that.
Sure.
So we ended up having some breakthrough, and I asked her to marry me. We both knew it was coming, so it wasn't anything crazy or surprising. We just, from the beginning, we've been pretty open just about everything. So whatever I'm going through emotionally or, stressed out during that time, we've had each other to kind of like grow through all of that. And like I said, I'm kind of recluse outside of that. So we kind of just used each other to kind of process through that kind of stuff during that season. So, so got married and the rest is history, right? So, So that was kind of like up until marriage. And during that time we got married, I needed to be responsible. So I got a job, started working normal hours. So that's kind of when I started the normal, like, I'm going to be a man and responsible and do the thing I'm supposed to do. Don't know what that is, but so I got a job at the city of Tulsa. I was working for the stormwater department, and we were, I was clocking hours there and working my way up the ranks. So I can keep going. Like I said, I could talk forever on my story. So, but
I think I was just going to say, in thinking back, you hadn't taken big steps at that point to be an entrepreneur. But one of the things you just said, which I haven't heard from a lot of our guests, is be willing to embrace being uncomfortable. And I think as humans, and especially as Americans, we are very much geared towards build as much comfort around our lives as possible. And that uncomfortableness that you guys experienced, that's continued. I mean, today, you're in an Airbnb, you guys have multiple kids, you're traveling around the country in an RV. That willingness to embrace the uncomfortable situations, I think, is essential for being an entrepreneur, because sometimes you don't know where the next paycheck or the next job is, or if you're going to make it, or if your business is going to make it. And so, those experiences, it's one thing to be told that, but it's another thing to live that. And even, high school or right after high school days, you guys were experiencing some of that.
Yep. Yeah, no, I agree completely. And that's something that, I have such a hard time, because that wasn't exampled to me. That was something that, all these other components of my life, I can look back and say, hey, that's where I got that. That's where I drew that. This concept of like being uncomfortable was something that and this is where I really go to, I believe this is something that, God gave me in a way, was like the willingness to be uncomfortable.
Yep.
And that's something that, I don't know how to teach that to other people. And over the years, that's something that I've been really, I've done a lot of consulting. I've done a lot of, kind of mentoring in a way. And that's the thing it always comes back to, is like, because even what you said, I think there's one more piece to kind of the entrepreneur journey, and one piece of that is even wondering or figuring out, even if what you're supposed to, or is this what you're supposed to be doing? I think a lot of the times in the entrepreneur world, especially in the hustle culture, it's like success or not success. But a big component of that is like, am I doing the right thing? Like, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? And I think a lot of times we don't allow ourselves to explore that question because it's uncomfortable. And so that's a big piece for me, is being okay with asking that question, even in seasons of productivity and seasons of prosperity. Like, is this okay? And even more in those seasons now, the older I get, the more I realize those are the times to ask those questions, because it's really easy to ignore those questions when things are going really good. And that's something that, I definitely have had my share of experiences that have maybe forced me to think that way. And now I kind of put that in my tool bag and try to learn how to maybe recognize when it's important to start asking those questions. Sometimes that can be a hindrance to maybe what we're working on. And that's something that, business partners and life partners, my wife and I, have that tug and pull where I'll maybe go, hey, things are going really good. Maybe we should pause and figure out why they're going good. And sometimes it's like, that can be frustrating to other people, on the outside, that aren't, they maybe don't feel like even that same timing. Maybe they agree with that concept, but it's like, hey, why would you interrupt this right now? So our joke with like our YouTube channel, Brecky Breck is what it's called. I joke all the time that my wife has to like hire security to help protect it at night. Otherwise, I'll come in at night and break it all down. Like, what? we gotta figure out, why are we doing this? What's the point? Like, what are So I definitely. And, I process all of that kind of stuff all the time. And I don't know what the right balance of that is. I would probably say I'm maybe a little bit more on the extreme, but that's something that I found is a tool that I really appreciate. And so maybe I use it more than I should, but I'd rather do that than not use it at all. So, yeah.
Well, sticking sort of with that question, let's fast forward a bit, because you had the water management job at some point in there. I take it there's a move back to Vancouver area and getting tore up from the floor up at Bowflex with Nick.
That's right. That's right, baby.
And
Bulking out Bowflex.
Nick has mentioned to me that there's some Ironman experience in there. And then now you've got this, by all counts, highly successful YouTube channel that continues to grow. And I imagine that that question of is this what I'm supposed to be doing has been kind of a recurring theme that you've returned to many times. In particular with the YouTube channel, since that's kind of the primary thing. I mean, it's got you traveling across the country right now. What did that question of, what are we supposed to be doing? How did you answer that with, we should be doing a YouTube channel? And what did it look like getting this thing off the ground?
Yeah. So that's a great question. I ask that daily, honestly, especially I think in the volatility of the YouTube world. There's a lot of opportunities to take a break and ask those questions. So there's never a season where it's just so smooth and so good to where it's like, I'll ask that next week. It's like, no, I'm going to ask it every single day. For the YouTube channel for Brecky Breck, it definitely started out as a part-time thing. It was, we were in the Portland area, we were in Vancouver, and I was running a co-working space with a partner in the area, and my wife was like, hey, I need to do something. Like I want to do more than just, we have 4 toddlers in the house. Like we almost all 4 of them were in diapers at the same time. So my wife kind of got to a point where she's like, I want to do something outside of just stay-at-home mom. She wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, but she wanted to have some sort of outlet. And we had been, watching YouTube. I've been familiar with YouTube. We have some friends that are full-time YouTubers at this point as well. So we're familiar with maybe what it takes to get into that. And then obviously, like I said, kind of my history of being familiar with maybe the tools that are necessary to get started. It was really easy for me to say, hey, like, why don't you try this out? So it was more of me kind of saying, or like giving her permission and our family permission to like explore something outside of like this hustle and this job. Cause, it definitely was something that, was alluring or entertaining. I think YouTube at that point, it was 2017, I think, when we were talking about this. YouTube wasn't glamorized as it is today. So not everyone said they wanted to be a YouTuber. When you said, I do stuff on YouTube, it was more of a cringy thing than it is now. Now there's kind of this like, ooh, that could be a real thing or whatever. But back then it was like, you do YouTube stuff. So who knows what that that means even today. But so it definitely it was a low risk side thing. My wife has always been really outgoing. That's something that she's really comfortable and on stage. She grew up leading worship for churches. She kind of has her own entrepreneur journey as well, which is really unique and kind of aligns really well with kind of our story. She grew up, her dad ran a landscaping business, and as a kid she was homeschooled, but part of her week she would actually go door to door canvassing with her family. And so as a young kid, she's in middle school, she's talking to people, she's selling her dad's business, she's seeing the whole from sale to execution. So and she's building those skills as well. So a lot of those skills transfer. She's able to just jump on the phone and just call people or address people or confront people if necessary. So when we were talking about this YouTube kind of vision and what this looks like, we were realizing like, hey, your skills, your upbringing, your skill set really translates well to kind of the scene. And then my skills from video production and design and marketing, I'd been dabbling in marketing at that point as well. It's like this kind of is a beautiful combination of our skill set. And we've been looking for an excuse to maybe do something together. I had been running into walls with maybe the compatibility with business partners and trying to figure out what type of person I work well with. I'd been in the commercial real estate scene a little bit, and I didn't fit very well in that scene. So I butt heads with that scene, because when you are someone that says, hey, we should stop and ask why in the commercial real estate scene, that's not a very it's not a welcoming perspective to take a lot of the time. So and you lose out on deals, and it's not productive. So anyway, this, the allure for me was I want to explore working, like having a business with my wife. Like we work well together on the projects we do together. We actually had been kind of co-directors over the children's program at our church that we'd been going to as well. So we were running the kids program already. So again, it was just another thing. Like, we're doing a kids YouTube channel. We're already running all these programs for kids. We have kids of our own. Like it was something that felt very natural. And so initially it was, yes, green light. There wasn't, when something's fresh and new and different, I don't necessarily come out of the gate with the questions or the pauses and, wanting to know, why are we doing this? What is it for? I'm very optimistic and look for a reason to try it out. And that's something that I'm learned about myself. I'm a devil's advocate. I've struggled to find another term to use for that, because sometimes that ends up being a little bit of pain in the butt, but that's what I end up being. And so when there's something that's new, there's not a lot of opposition. So I end up being full support. Once things are going well, then a lot of times I'll switch sides and start saying, why is it going well? And so that ends up being kind of the position I take. I think that's a more maybe my personality and less like a tool that I would encourage all entrepreneurs to have. It's definitely helpful. If anything, find someone who's a devil's advocate and put them in your camp, even if it's a pain in the butt. I think that's that definitely something that maybe is easy for me to say, since that's me. It would be maybe harder to say if I had someone else in my life that was doing that to me as much as I do it to other people. But yeah, I think
we'll call you the great contrarian.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, honestly, I've spent maybe too much time trying to come up with like a term or a title that I that I can like stand with. But devil's advocate, shakes it up a bit. So I'll stick with that for now. So, but yeah, I guess to answer your question, it was maybe less initially less looking for reasons to question the why and more looking for reasons to get excited about it. It was something new and fresh and different. I've dabbled in a few entrepreneur journeys up to this point. But this was something that was like, hey, this has potential to have, we would have complete, control over what that is and how we can move forward with that. And I think for me, that meant if I want to question it down the road, I can, and I'm not going to have a business partner that threatens me, or maybe I do, but hey, we're married, so we got to work it out. Where it's, traditionally, I've had a few experiences that got pretty uncomfortable in a non-desirable way because of, some of the questions that I've proposed. And so that's something that I got a little bit burnt out by that point and was looking for something that, I could feel a little bit more of a purpose and vision to as it grows. So
that's a great answer. And so it was 2017 that you started putting out videos with Brecky Breck.
Yep.
And how has the vision for the program changed in that time? Did you start by doing weekly videos, and how have you seen it grow?
Yeah, no, it's definitely a unique journey. Initially, it was just a side project. We're dabbling. I think, as any side project starts, it's like, no, this could be a thing. We don't know what, but it could be something, right? So we started doing it, ended up being something that we really enjoyed. We get a babysitter and we go like to the zoo, or we go like learn, meet some cool people or learn about something we want to do. So it ended up being, regardless of the output of the channel, it was something that we enjoyed doing together. And it like we joked around it being like a little date night. We'd go out to dinner afterwards, and it's like we just got a whole day in, and we worked, but there was a productivity, I think, that filled my wife's cup. Like, I'm working on something, I'm building something, and then for me, I'm creating something, right? I'm exercising my creativity, and then we get to spend that time together. So there definitely was a piece of that initially it was like this outlet for us. We didn't have this expectation of it delivering. It was a side project. I definitely was aware and have been aware of the potential of YouTube. Like I said, we have other YouTube friends that were full time already at that point from YouTube and doing quite well. And so that's something for me. It's like I knew the potential for it, but it wasn't something like, we're going to make this thing, grow and pay all our bills and retire and build a team or whatever. And so initially it was just kind of an outlet piece. And then things just started to click in terms of like, everything just was simple. Like we were able to exercise all our skills together. My wife and I, like back to back, we're just this thing that we kind of like, we're like, oh, I wonder what we should do. We're realizing these are all like from calling a new business with a random inquiry to say, hey, it's kind of random. Can we come film this thing and try to pitch that? It's like, that was so natural to us. So, and we've met a lot of YouTubers over the years that struggle with a lot of those components, but they really like their one thing. For us, there's not really one thing that we enjoy. We enjoy the whole process. And so, it definitely, now that we're doing it more, I'm definitely ready to start handing off some of that process. But sure. But initially, it was definitely just more of the enjoyment. And then it ended up kind of growing. We got a little bit more familiar with the industry. We started seeing stuff in the children's YouTube scene specifically that started to be a little bit more concerning. So we started to develop maybe a purpose that was a little bit bigger than just the side project, and going, hey, like there needs to be some how do we put this, like responsible creator representation in the children's YouTube scene. This is something that's not going away. YouTube Kids specifically, like content for kids. And so if there's not people that are intentional about what type of content they're putting out, or at least have ties to some sort of integrity structure that kind of shows some longevity to what we're producing. So that was kind of the beginning of us maybe feeling a little bit bigger purpose to this content, was maybe seeing some red flags in some of the other representations of the industry and going, maybe we do belong here and need to be here for, something bigger than just our uploads on the weekends. And that's definitely a big piece of that we don't get to talk about that much. But that's a big driving force, even to today's tour and what we're doing. There's a big kind of back end piece from like questionable characters to threats of lawsuits to all sorts of things. There's a whole list of things that have happened since then that, if anything, have just kind of made it easier and easier for us to know, like, yep, we're gonna do this one way or the other. We're gonna make it work. And if we don't right now, we don't see a lot of other people that are representing maybe this voice. And that's definitely a bigger kind of more integrity pull for us. So
I love that. And I think that as you continue to ask the question, why are we doing this, or should we be doing this? I mean, you found your why, right? And that, as we've heard so many times as entrepreneurs, that is essential to have that piece figured out. And I think that speaks to you and I have had some conversations. There's the difference between the mission driven and the passion and the creativity versus, hey, this looks cool and I want to try to make a bunch of money and I want to try to make it big for my own name. I mean, that's not been you guys. And I think that's why you align so well with Abundant Journey. And how do we make a difference? How do we use our talents, our stories, our history, our gifts to then make a difference in the people around us? And you guys are doing that, which I love. So, keep pressing on with that. Let's shift a little bit here. A couple questions just more geared toward entrepreneurs. You've been around a lot of them. You've seen success in so many different ways. What are maybe some underrated skills that every entrepreneur needs to get after it? And I think we've hit on a few of them today, but maybe just some that come to mind.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think one for me would be one big one for me would be the ability. Do you want me to keep going, Nick?
Yep.
Or do we take a break? Okay, cool.
Yeah, he said go.
Okay, cool. One big skill for me for entrepreneurs would be maybe the ability to take in perspectives. I think a lot of times we have a hard time, we get inspired by something specific. And then what we're taught in the entrepreneur world is surround yourself with that, like pack yourself in, don't allow yourself an out. So in terms of productivity and success, in the way that maybe the entrepreneurial world has defined it, that is a way to get to that. The problem with that is there's not a lot of diversity there. There's not a lot of variety in what you're experiencing. And so for me, I had, even up until Bowflex, I think I had 20 full-time jobs between the Kohl's department job to maybe a couple after Bowflex. So it was 20 to 25 full-time jobs before I said, this is enough. But in all of that time, I got to all these different perspectives and people and managers. I get to watch people. And that's something that I was very intentional about, kind of those intakes. I didn't know it at the time, but I was always analyzing my managers. I was always analyzing my leaders. I wrote a paper when I was 19 years old. And it's so funny because I look back and I'm like, I wrote this? Like, I thought I was just kind of like gumming through life, not doing anything, but I'm like finding all this stuff. I was like, oh, I was so intentional. I love this about myself. I wrote a paper about an experience I had with a supervisor who wasn't even my direct boss, but someone even further up in the city of Tulsa with that stormwater department, about how my confidence in our interactions made them feel uncomfortable enough to where they sought after my approval. And there's someone that's been there for so long. I was a temp at that time. And it was something that was so, especially coming from, the summer camp and the ministry, a lot of times you get a lot of good interactions, I think, in, when you meet people that are in the I don't want to say industry, but in the lifestyle of being on stage and talking to people. There's a lot of practice, I think, in that environment. And so when you get outside of that, it was a little bit of a rude awakening to realize there's people that are in positions of power that have a really hard time with confidence or kind of composing themselves. And so this paper I wrote is The Power of Confidence, and it's cringy in its own right. It's a 19-year-old kind of figuring himself out, but the concept of it is something that stuck with me, and it's this idea that like your confidence in a situation is going to dictate the output of that situation. And that can be for what, being intentional, I think is what that translates to, is like, it's less about being confident and trying to win the situation or the interaction, and more about you can be confident in what you get out of that situation. So I want to be intentional about it. And so that's something that's carried with me in everything I do. I play a lot of pickleball now. And I go and play pickleball and I come back, not, I did good, I did bad. I come back with, I met this person and this interaction was interesting, or it made me feel good, or I made them feel good. And I was practicing, encouraging them, and their play got better. So there's definitely this intentionality with like, I'm going to be present. I'm going to be all in on this experience, but when I'm away from it, I'm going to analyze it. I think being intentional about gaining new perspectives, I think, is what that tool boils down to. I don't know, like could not be a tool, but yeah.
I think that's huge. And I think that absolutely is an underrated skill, because everybody has something they can teach us. But I love that step further that you say is not only experiencing and learning, but analyzing later. And what could I have done differently? What could I take from this person? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? And so I think just the continued embracing of learning. And I think that's, you hit it from a people perspective. And a lot of times we've had conversations, even on the podcast, of just learning in general. But I don't think the emphasis on learning from people is something that gets talked about enough.
No, and especially too, I'll add that not just when it's convenient, right? I think a lot of times we want to learn when it's convenient, or when it's clean and like sexy and cool, right? But I think learning, being able to like still learn, not just from the failure. I think people, that's definitely something that the entrepreneurial world takes care of pretty well. It's learn from failure. I think like being able to like draw out something from a situation that maybe typically you would have walked away with something. And I remember like actually back in the Bowflex days, the early Bowflex days, I had a coworker in my department that was in a pretty aggressive network marketing business. And they were like making it full time while also answering like customer service calls on the phone call. And I always thought it was funny because he had always talked about like, I'm retiring next year and, doing this stuff. And for me, I was always intrigued by what motivated him. It was never like, stay away from me, I don't want this like, business model or whatever. It was more of like, you were very motivated. And I'm curious about that. And there was a curiosity. So like, I wasn't signing up for stuff, but it was, I want to learn what's driving this motivation you have. So I went to all the meetings. I was like going to the meetings knowing I'm not going to sign up for anything, but I'm just watching people, and I'm watching the desperation and voices. I'm watching the leaders and like the skills they have. And I'm watching this model of like freedom and maybe autonomy from normalcy. And so even in that situation that maybe typically for me personally, I initially would say, this is a bad taste in my mouth, I don't want to have anything to do with this. I wanted to like challenge myself and say, can I go there and still find a nugget? Can I find some sort of angle that is still valuable here, to where I'm not going through life in a season that sucks, or in a situation that is a bummer, or a conversation even that I feel like is a waste of my time? Is there a way to not have it be a waste of my time? Is there a way that I can actually still like somehow look from some sort of angle here and say, I appreciate that. Even if it was a simple, I appreciate that I was able to provide something in that situation. So I think that just ties into like, don't be afraid. So I went to a ton of these meetings, and it was honestly, it was a bunch of different people, and I almost like was addicted to just the meetings piece. It was like, man, there's something so fascinating. I'd watched, and I gotta be careful. This one was a pretty aggressive version of it. I have friends involved in other versions of network marketing and stuff, and I think honestly the whole word of mouth marketing is I'm fascinated by it. At this point in my life, it was something that like I maybe initially would have been kind of like turned off by what I was being presented with, but I was so fascinated with that, like what it was doing to people that I'm curious and I want to learn about like this this experience. So they'd pack the room, and it would be like I'd be thinking like, man, they could book a bigger room, but I'm realizing they didn't book a bigger room on purpose. And so I'm like looking at like, oh, okay. So I'm looking at the desire people have to be free from their jobs. Like that's the hook. And I'm like, oh, that's a real desire. So, how can I start to maybe feed into that, even to my buddy that I was going to these meetings with, is like, hey, I want to help you. Like, let's problem solve this. Like, it doesn't have to be just this one thing. Like, what if there were other ways that you can get out of that too? So, so that's a way maybe that I've exercised that skill, if you will, over time.
I love that. I love the looking at it differently, and you've always done that. In whatever you've approached and whatever you've done, you've always had that mentality. How do I look at this different than everybody else? I'm curious, and I'm smirking a little bit because I'm wondering where you're going to go with this question. But between the YouTube world, the financial freedom world, there are so many pieces of advice from experts that get thrown out at us. And you guys have lived so much life that I think people either dream of or are too afraid to go for. What is some expert advice that you guys have heard before that in your experiences, you're like, yeah, this is just rubbish. That advice is garbage. And I'm putting you on the spot, but I'm curious where you'd go with that.
Yeah, no, that's good. So I have let's see, you can cut this out. I have a maybe PG-13 version that is kind of funny. And then I have some other ones too. So feel free to do what you want with it. So I had a business partner, in the real estate scene. I'll leave it general. That was a little bit older than me and kind of was taking me under his wing. And one of his words of wisdom was, sometimes in business you have to show up with knee pads and mouthwash. And I think that is rubbish. So that is a piece of advice that I would say throw out the window, like, no, thank you. And now even like the longer I go from that, I'm realizing that not literally, but that was even being applied to me, to him as a partner. And so that's something that like, that partnership didn't end well. Honestly, I haven't talked to him since one of our last confrontations. That was ended up being kind of the end to the partnership, was that concept of we're going in different ways. So and that's something where it's like, you just got to do the dirty work, I think is really what that boils down to. And it's like, I don't think you have to do the dirty work if you can challenge the dirty work. And maybe that isn't helpful for the bottom line, right? Maybe that isn't helpful if you have all these investors strung up on your investment, and you will, feel this weight if you do not do the right thing. Then maybe you do have to do the dirty work at that point. So if anything, what that taught me is being careful with what I attach to the project I'm working on, to make sure that I'm still able to ask myself those questions I think that we talked about earlier. Right? If there's so much weight tied to it, sometimes we have to kind of like close our eyes and do the dirty work without too much thought, or else like we're letting so many people down. Right? And so that's a big thing. I think for me, we stay really lean. We've had some investment opportunity even with our YouTube stuff or some other bigger project potential, acquisition stuff, that through that process have kind of applied the same perspective and decided to forego that, even though 99% of it looks just good and like a good step forward. I think the weight of it would have made it more difficult for us to not entertain the dirty work, if you will. So so hopefully that was
no, that's
fun
great.
that in a way that was
I think that's great. I think that's true. And again, there's so much advice out there from different people, that, man, there's so much advice going around out there, but you guys, again, have lived it and your experiences have brought different thoughts. So my last question here, before we kind of jump into the last segment of the show, I'm curious, again, take this the way that you want, but a lot of times we define success differently and people have that different level of what success looks like. I feel like we could spend another hour just talking about that in and of itself. And maybe we need to two-part this, but I'm curious, what do you think the secret sauce is to success in entrepreneurs, knowing full well that there isn't one thing, but how would you answer that?
Yeah, that is a hard question. I think it's different for everybody. Everybody has to find what that means to them. So I guess I'll answer for me. My secret sauce comes from the joy that I get out of the interactions I have with people. That goes for my kids, and my wife, number one. If we travel, if we have $0 in the bank and we don't know where our next night is, business is moving, but there's points where that still happens. If we can protect ourselves from the stress and still be able to enjoy that moment and what we get to experience, that is to me way more valuable than anything else in business and entrepreneurship. And I think that's the beauty of entrepreneurship, is being able to be in that position to have things stripped away and be able to appreciate that. So for me, it's the joy, not just self, but what you can experience with other people. And that goes outside of family as well. Like I mentioned earlier, I've been playing a lot of pickleball, and being able to see the break from, I think, self consciousness, even in their pickleball game, but you can see that that's something that someone else has translated to or transferred to the rest of their life, right? This is just isolated to pickleball. Being able to be a little bit of light and have some fun, and if they miss a shot, say, "Hey, it's okay. Let's do something crazy this next time." And that brief moment of joy that you get to share with someone, I think that's something that for me is my secret sauce to success, my secret sauce to business, my secret sauce to all of my interactions. And that's something that, I pursue with my kids daily. I pursue with my wife daily. I pursue, all my interactions are kind of tied to that moment of for this moment, I'm giving you 100%. All calls get ignored, even though this isn't a valuable business decision or something. It's if you have my time, you have my time. It may be hard to get my time up until that point, but that's because I'm doing that to everything that's in front of me. So I think that's, if you can get to a place where the things that are in front of you mean 100% to you, then that can be more valuable than a big payout. That can be more valuable than any amount of residual income. That can be more valuable than anything, because it doesn't matter what your life situation is. You're able to find joy out of that. And that's something that, I'll kind of end it with this. Through kind of our life experiences, there's so much more in there that, obviously is hard to pack into one conversation, but we've learned to take what would typically be these crushing, stressful moments that definitely were in those moments, but come out of that intentional and come out of that with something from that, because we were intentional with that. And so our family motto that we've kind of developed over the years is turn stress into adventure. And it can be challenging at times because we may be a little bit addicted to stress at this point. And so we gotta draw ourselves back sometimes, but there's definitely a piece of that I think if people can start to look at what typically would be something that's very stressful or heavy and look at that as an opportunity to grow. And if we can see it from that perspective, then I think, we'll be able to kind of come out stronger. And just like working out, sometimes you get a little sore or sometimes you get injured, but if you keep at it, you can kind of push through. So
that's such a fantastic perspective. I mean, I love that line of turning stress into adventure. It makes me think of well, Indiana Jones is one of the first that comes to mind, like the kind of the quintessential adventure film,
Yeah.
which I get stressed out watching. He's the poster child for turning stress into adventure. But you also think of other real life examples, and you think of pretty much anybody who's accomplished anything great or pioneered something new. There's stress in that journey, but having that positive framing, looking to, okay, this is part of the process and the outcome here is going to be good, I think is really helpful. And to get your whole family on board with that, that's an exciting thing to be able to do.
Well, and I will say too, if I can interrupt quickly, one thing I wanted to bring up on that note is, I think so often in our entrepreneurial journey, and this is something I learned even through those like network marketing days, I thought it's so fascinating by how much we protect our shortcomings and our stress, right? When we're an entrepreneur, you have to pretend that you're making it. You have to pretend that everything's perfect and everything's good. And it's kind of, we're all kind of doing the same thing. And so when I was running the co-working space, we had a lot of entrepreneurs in there. We had a lot of fun, like networking events. And we got to a point where we kind of realized walking around the room, like there was a point where none of us had enough money to go out and get drinks. But we're all running these big businesses that we could do interviews and do all this stuff. But there was like, there happened to be one point where we're like, I can't really go do that. And we kind of like did this like, oh, we're all struggling, but like successful and free, but struggling. And so we joked about like, we need to start a podcast that's like, that documents the now before you make it. And it's like, we're all people that like, even now, like I can look back to all those people and it's like, all right, they have money, they can go get drinks now. But it was like that particular time we were in that, like that infancy phase of entrepreneurship where we just protect it and pretend, it ends up being this, like, I got to present myself. And I think there's a reality to the confidence that comes with that, but not being able to talk about that has always been something that I struggle with. And that's something that like, there's so many stories that like I've never shared that I'm like, I wish I could share this right now, but like I would maybe even lose respect from clients because of sharing this thing. And I know everybody like has their version of that. We had a car repossessed one time, and like the next day I wanted to share it. And it wasn't even, it was just dumb. It was like dumb decisions. We had money. It was actually during the most like profitable time of our ventures, but we were just so spread out all over the place. And it was just like, we got the car back, but it was like, it was just like, I want to share this. Like this happens, right? And not being able to share that, I think a lot of times, especially again, in that infancy phase, a lot of times it's hard to like someone has to go first a lot of times. And then the other side of it is that we have to respect that journey. And if not everybody respects that journey, we feel like we have to protect ourselves. So there's a vulnerability that I think I've learned. And especially since we do our own thing now, we're not tied to investors. So I don't have to pretend, I don't have to have like kind of spin this beautiful light anymore. It's like, last week we were waiting for sponsorship money to come in and our YouTube check to come in at the same time. So we literally had like 3 days where we had $0 last week. And so we were like Walmart parking lotting it, but it's not something enough to where I'm like, help us. We don't know what we're going to do. It's like, no, we just have no money right now, but I have a $5,000 check hitting the account on Tuesday. We have $2,500 sponsorships coming. Like, it's definitely something where it's not everything's peachy right now, but we're able to take that moment and know, hey, we're going to be okay. We can be vulnerable with our relationship with that. And so I just think it's fascinating. And that's something I want to encourage to the audience, if anything, is in that infancy phase when you're going through that. You don't necessarily have to come full cards every time, but challenging yourself to be vulnerable, especially from peer to peer. It's different if you're pitching to a client and all that stuff. I get, wanting to present well, but peer to peer, like open up, be vulnerable, and be able to talk about that stuff. I think that lowers the barrier for other people to feel okay about taking that jump. And I think that goes back to what you were saying earlier, Nick James, about like we do a lot of things that people aspire to do. What they're not willing to do is let their car go in the repossession. What they're not willing to do is go into a Walmart parking lot for a few days. And without us being vulnerable about that, people don't know that it's actually a lot more achievable. You just have to have a different set of values or be okay with some things. And so a lot of times people look at us and say, I wish I could do that someday. And like, you have way more money than I do, right? I have $0 in savings. You have way more money. If I had the same amount of money that you have right now, there's so many more things that I could be doing. So it's not about money. It's not about comfort. So that's definitely something that, I feel like I'm continuing to convey to other people as well. So.
Yeah. Well, first, I really look forward to either one day reading the book or watching the documentary where you're able to, share all of these stories that you've been saving up, or maybe that's a podcast, whatever form that comes out in. I'm all about it. I can't wait to hear more of that. And what you just said there, actually, we had another interview just the other day, and the guy said that, and I think it's fairly common advice, but he was talking about advice his dad gave him that was just, to do what others can't, you have to be willing to sacrifice what others won't. And it is easy to look at the accomplishments of other entrepreneurs, people that have been successful, and all you see is the number of views or subscribers. You don't see all of the sacrifices the night in the Walmart parking lot, or even going further back, like you putting up the cardboard around your girlfriend's car in the subway parking lot. Exactly. You got to have both, and it's really awesome to me how you all have embraced that, and the ways that you're seeing growth. And like Nick had said, I think that there's a million direction. I got a million more questions for you. How you turn a creative endeavor like making videos something that you love to do and not burn out on it. I got a bunch of questions around that, but what I think it means is that
I don't have an answer for that, by the way. So.
Well, good. That dovetails well with what I was going to say, because I think that we'll have to do a part 2 at some point and have you back.
Yeah,
so you can think about.
Maybe, exactly. Yeah, there you go. Maybe I'll have some time. Yeah, exactly. Well, and I got to tell my Iron Man story because it relates to Nick when we were playing flag football. There's a whole piece to that that is like such an interesting. It's crazy trying to even like have these conversations, because I realized that how many defining moments are in my life. Because even preparing for this call with you guys, I was, just going through like, this would be a good, nice little nugget, or here's the thing. And then even in conversation, like, oh, there's so many things, like, and it's so cool to just even personally reflect on that. So less about even needing to share that and more about like, I enjoy reflecting on that time. And so I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, we will definitely 2-part this. And what I want to do is get you out of here with our gold nugget round. And that just means we won't have to do that next time. So let's dive into these. These are the same 4 questions that we ask all of our guests. And we've gotten just a great range of answers in the past. And honestly, I think we've hit most of these already today, but I'm going to fire them at you. So one of the things we talk about at Abundant Journey is the 5 F's. I just want you to pick one of these, even though you could pick all of them, and tell me ways you're looking here into 2024, excited to grow in that area. So family, finance, faith, fitness, or future. Pick one and tell us what you're excited about this year.
Yeah, that's good. Honestly, I'll have to go with faith on this one, Nick. Faith for 300. No, I think faith is something that I grew up. My dad is I grew up in the church. My dad's pastor, and then ran Christian summer camps. And that's something that, like, initially, I think internally, I had that natural like pastor's kid rebellion. But I never like fully rebelled. So it was kind of this weird, just like, it's there. I appreciate it, but it's not something that I'm fully leaning into, but I'm intentional about everything that I do. So it's like, it's interwoven into that. I think I'm realizing, I've wrestled with all these other elements of my life. And I think faith is definitely something that I'm challenging myself this year. Just in being intentional with faith. I think that's something that I've avoided. Maybe just because of not knowing what that means to me. And especially if you're raised in a faith household, sometimes you have to, figure out and establish what faith means to you separate than what you were handed. And so that's something that I have always known that. I just haven't really come back to that and said, I'm going to be intentional about that. And I've already kind of, that's been something that's maybe been tugging at my heart. And I just want to kind of be intentional about that, because I believe that ties into everything else. And that's kind of been a piece that maybe I've been a little bit nervous or scared to get more intentional about. So
that's a great answer, and appreciate the vulnerability and honesty with that, because I think, again, if you look around, it's kind of like your story with not having money for drinks and everybody was in the same boat. I think we all at some point are in that situation, whether we admit it or not. So that's a great answer.
Yep, that's awesome. Yeah.
Next one here. What's a quote from a book or mentor that stuck with you along your journey?
Yeah. This is great. I have too many to answer. So can I do a two-parter here? Is that okay? I'll make it quick. Okay. So one quote that has stuck with me and I repeat all the time, and this is a little bit more of an inspirational to starting ventures. And honestly, I don't know the root of I don't know who said it originally. There's someone that went to my high school that was a couple years older than me that ended up being pretty successful in Silicon Valley. Ryan Hoover is his name. And he, in an interview one time, said, if you pitch to a meeting a meeting to 1,000 people, I'm going to butcher this, by the way. So if you, in front of 1,000 people physically, pitch an idea and only one person likes it, that's pretty demoralizing, right? It's something that we, that's low odds, and it's frustrating. Take those same odds to the internet and you have a whole segment audience, you have a whole fan base. And that's something that I've always kind of seen and realized, like, all right, I can feel kind of alone in my little circle, but the reality is there's so many people out there. And I watch that in, especially social media age. It's like you have these little niche things. It's like, what the heck? This guy's a Rubik's Cube influencer, and like, 0 out of 10 people in his immediate circle are into that, but he's got, millions of followers online or something. So, so that's my one. I say that all the time to people, maybe in inspiration, to try to like, hey, put it out there. Just because no one around you is seeing it. It's like a lot of times we're like, nah, this isn't something that I should. It's like, go find it. Find someone else that's interested and try it out. So that's my nugget. The other nugget that I definitely wanted to leave y'all with is anything by Shane Snow. So if you haven't read any Shane Snow books, he's got 3 main books. They're all awesome. The Storytelling Edge is definitely one to start with. Smart Cuts is another good one. I always struggled with reading, and that's something that maybe was a little bit different. In me and my entrepreneur journey, we're told to like read books and appreciate reading books. Like to this day, like I have all the books and I've started all the books, and then I go watch an interview and I'm like, oh, got it. Like for me, it's like, it always makes sense. So to read the book is more about the meditation element, and I get that elsewhere. So, Shane Snow books are the first books that I read and was like, I am excited to keep reading. And honestly, it's been rare that I found a book outside of his books that have done that. So I've had a video dialogue with him a number of years ago, and he's really, really awesome guy. I don't know what he's up to now, but that's always been my recommendation. If you haven't heard of Shane Snow, read his books. That's definitely a go-to. So
that's great.
Yeah,
I love it. Next one here. What's a dream or goal that you have that you've not been able to accomplish yet?
Yeah, this is good. It's kind of a trick answer to this. I've always done a dream board. This is something I learned in the network marketing days, actually, is get your dream board, put your stuff up there. They would always put their Lamborghinis and all their other stuff up there. What I realized over time is all of that stuff disappeared. And what I did is I created a, 2 months, 6 months, 12 months, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. And then I have a happily ever after. That was the key piece that no one ever had. What is happily ever after to you is my first prompt question when I do my dream board. And the second prompt question is, what's keeping you from happily ever after right now? So this is something I visit very often.
Love that.
Nothing keeping me from my happily ever after right now. So sorry, I'm trick answering your question.
No, it's great.
My happily ever after is that I'll trust God's hand in my kids' life so much that I'll allow them to be free and pursue what they want to pursue, and I'll figure out a way to be supportive of them. So I guess I haven't accomplished that yet because they're still growing up, and I have many, many challenges that I've yet to experience with them, and I know it's going to be challenging. So,
no, I love that. That's so good. Last one here ties into the quote, happily ever after, but at the end of your life, what do you hope you'll be remembered for?
Oh man, this is hard. Cause I recognize everybody's different.
Yep.
And this is going to sound like a self-righteous answer, but I don't care. I don't care. And like, I truly believe that. I always ask, or I always hear people say, I hope I'm remembered for this. I hope I'm remembered for this. And I don't want to dog on people that do have that feeling. I just don't, I don't have that. Like, I guess what I want to know in myself is that I never took away from someone, right? I think of things in linear when it comes to personal progression, when it comes to faith. I'm not a need to save everybody's salvation kind of guy. I'm like, I want to make sure that I'm presenting forward progress, right? So maybe that's when I die, I want to make sure that I did the best I could to help not take away. I don't need to have a certain amount of influence as much as I want to make sure that the things I did do were either neutral or forward progress for people in their lives. So, and that goes for, my family and the people close to me as well. So
I love it. That's an awesome answer. And know that you got others in your camp. We've had a few folks on the podcast that have had a very similar sort of an answer of just that not a main concern, but the shared theme is just wanting to another way perhaps of saying it is leave the world, leave the relationships that you're in better than you found them.
Yep.
Certainly not worse.
Yep.
And it sounds to me a lot like that's what is very naturally happening in the course that your life and lives as a family have taken. It's amazing to me, just the journey that y'all are on. I'm sure the kind of memories and experiences that your kids are getting as you're on the road and as you're figuring it out, and all these different spaces and RV life. It's very exciting. I do love the space that you're filling with quality kids programming in the YouTube space. I totally see the need for that there. As a parent with 3 young children, I'm grateful that for the voice that y'all have, and only hope and expect that that's going to continue to grow, and excited for whatever other opportunities that opens up down the tracks as well. So
thank you.
We will definitely have to circle back and catch up again. But in the meantime, for our listeners, where are the best places for them to connect with you, support what you're doing, follow along, watch? Where would you send them?
Yeah. So that's a hard question to answer because I don't personally have a lot that I put out there. If you want to stay close to the flame in terms of the business side of what I do, I definitely try to touch in with LinkedIn every once in a while. So find me on LinkedIn, connect with me there. That's something that I appreciate that platform. And I think there's potential there if you can get through all the sales stuff. And then we're on this journey for this tour. So, at least for this year, we'll be posting everything to our personal, Young with Kids is the name of our channel. So Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We're doing a vlog for now. That's one of those things that's like is less about the admin that goes in the vlog and more about the like, is this something we should be doing kind of thing. But for now, we're doing a vlog, and then we at least want to do updates there. So if you want to follow along, you can learn about our Brecky Breck stuff. You can learn about YouTube stuff. Get a little bit behind the scenes and kind of what our family's up to. So Young with Kids, wherever you can find it.
Yeah. And if people wanted to catch you on the tour, are those in-person events that as you're going through we've got a listener base from across the United States. Yep. And so is there somewhere that they can find the tour dates?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So breckybreck.com/tour. Find out all of our dates there. The further out they are, the more of a placeholder they are. But once we're coming into town, then we'll be able to have more information there. The events are for families with kids 7-ish and younger. If you don't have kids, please don't show up. We've had a few people that are a little bit questionable. So not showing up to the events, but like are saying excited to come, and then we're like, hey, this isn't for you. So that's the not so glamorous side of being online. So
I love that. I mean, I don't, but I do.
That's good.
Well, I will include links to all of these spots that you mentioned in the show notes. So listeners, do check those out. Follow along. You can also follow Nick and I and the Abundant Journey happenings at abundantjourney.net. And the very best thing, the thing that we would appreciate more than anything else in the world, is if you were to share this episode with somebody that you think would find value in it. And so please do hit the share button. At the very least, if you could leave us a starred review or some thoughts, that really does help with others discovering the show and hopefully inspiring more entrepreneurship for good as far and wide as we can possibly reach. But man, Kylan, this has been awesome. Thank you so very much for your time, and look forward to doing it again.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Nick. And Nick, for having me. You guys are awesome. Really appreciate what you guys are doing, and excited to see what's in store for the podcast and your guys' journey.
Absolutely. All right, listeners, thanks for chiming in with us. We'll see you next time.